Welcome to another episode of Yu-Gi-Oh! Player Ranks. In this series, we rank various Yu-Gi-Oh! Themes based on your comments and suggestions. Come back every Tier List Tuesday to see an all-new installment of this series. Alright, what's up guys? Today we are doing a new tier list. We are reviewing every single floodgate in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Basically, all of the floodgates. If we missed any, please let us know in the comment section down below, and obviously if you see anybody, tell us a floodgate. You can respond to them if you want to, but we're going to go through all of the different floodgates. If there are any tier lists that you want us to do, just comment it down below and we'll try to get around to all of them. Obviously there's so many decks and archetypes and themes and ideas and packs and so many different concepts that we can do these on. We're going to try to get around to as many as we can, but tough to do. But let's get to it. First of all, we've got Thousand Eyes Restrict. This is a tough one to grade. It really depends on where Instant Fusion is on the ban list. No one ever naturally summons this card unless you're actually playing the archetype. But typically, you Instant Fusion, take a monster, and then you can take another monster using Relinquished Anima once you link this one away. But believe it or not, this card actually does have a floodgate effect on it, which is that monsters cannot attack other than this card, and monsters can't change their battle positions. The floodgate effect of this card is really not that good. There was a time when it was really good, obviously GOAT format, but even then you could just do a lot of different things to it. You could like Sarketsu Arm and this would be gone. The floodgate effect is just okay, but just overall the card is actually quite decent. Next is Thunder Dragon Colossus. This one's another tough one. Where would we put this? Probably S or A tier.
Probably high A, just because it's like
really good.
It's really good, but it's a little wonky to summon. Like outside of like few applications, like the Nemesis, like you can realistically you can only summon it in Thunder Dragons
and Nemesis Keystone.
Yeah, and no, not Keystone. The Electric. I don't remember the Thunder one's name. Keystone's a rock.
One of the Nemesis monsters. But this card is obviously very good. It basically prevents your opponent from, or both of you, I think, right? No, just your opponent. So one-sided.
No, just your opponent.
Yeah, it's a one-sided mistake, which basically prevents your opponent from adding cards to their hand. It's kind of a crazy effect.
Except by drawing them. But obviously they can't add anything to their hand. That's kind of an insane effect to just prevent your opponent from adding cards. Yu-Gi-Oh! Is very, very reliant on adding cards. Most decks will search 2-3 times a turn at least, so I mean it's a tough matchup against a lot of decks. And then again, decks like Drytron, for example, you summon this against Drytron, it's a really tough thing for them to out. They need Forbidden Droplets, Imperm, stuff like that to even be able to play the game. And on top of that, it also protects itself,
probably the
so
most
it's even
important
harder
part
to get out. It's not just like a regular floodgate, like a continuous trap or spell where you can just MST it or something. Like you have to there's very specific applications to get rid of it, which makes it wild.
Next is the Buster Dragon Destruction. I forget the full name. It's like Buster Dragon Destruction Swords.
Blader, the Dragon Destroyer Swordsman. Yeah,
this card is probably like in C tier. It's extremely a niche applications. It's like disgusting against dragons. Like if you could summon this against Dragon Link, amazing. It changes them all to defense position, and then they can't activate their effects. Like this card is crazy. And obviously with the Buster Lock, this is actually really good, because with the Buster Lock you have Buster Dragon, you change them to defense mode. But again, literally it's only good in that application, which is the Buster Blader deck, and then in other applications it's only good if you summon against a dragon deck. Otherwise the card is just kind of okay. It's very reliant on what you summon it against. Next is Last Warrior from Another Planet. This is probably another like B tier card. It's a strong card. Obviously it will end games. Like this is the thing, a lot of these floodgates are very strong, but they have pretty easy counters. So this card, again, you will never naturally fusion summon this card. The fusion materials are probably monsters you haven't ever heard of, and I haven't ever heard of. But the crazy thing, actually, Zambiura the Dark is a decent card, but the other one is pretty garbage. But yeah, the materials for this are like cards most people have never used and will never use. So the only way that you will really ever summon this card is off of a Cyberstein, which if that is its own like gimmicky deck, or you can summon it off of
What's the card when it gets popped? You get to summon
Waking the Dragon.
Waking the Dragons. Those are the only two legitimate ways that you can actually summon this card. And the other issue with this card is as soon as it hits the field, it nukes your own board. So you put yourself in a situation, you blow up your own board for the rest of the turn. Neither, like, not for the rest of the turn, but for the rest of the game, neither player can normal or special summon as long as this card remains face up on the field, which is like a crazy effect. But again, you can't special summon, normal summon either. So you kind of put yourself in a weird position where you summon this, but your opponent can just set a monster. You attack over that monster. Next turn, your opponent just sets another monster. You can't ever really do any damage. So that's kind of an issue. You can set and then like flip things, but other than that, it really just creates a really slowed game state, and your opponent usually ends up drawing the out anyway. But usually it's a pretty strong Floodgate. Next is this is Invoked Caliga. This is another probably like B tier. When you summon it, you basically what is it like? It flashes your opponent, and it can only activate one card for the rest of the turn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Each player can only attempt to activate one monster.
Yeah.
So if they use one monster effect and you negate it with like Imperm or something.
Yeah.
Or I guess it's a bad example. If you negate it with like a Mechaba,
yeah,
you'd have both. So if you negate it with that, even though it negates the activation, they can't activate another one because they already attempted one. And then each player can only attack with one monster during each battle phase.
Yeah.
So it's like it's
like a double Floodgate.
It's kind of like a stronger like Thousand Eyes.
Yeah.
I guess because you can choose which monster attacks. So because if Thousand Eyes, if he takes a weak monster, then it's like you're attacking with like 300. It's like what does it matter?
Yeah. But it's a good card. Sometimes it comes up in Invoked, but most of the time they just end it on a Mechaba anyway. Next is Darklaw. Darklaw's pretty strong. You'd probably say he's A tier. He's almost all heroes really have right now. They have this in Plasma, and then they have this in Plasma if they're going first, and Dragoon. Not Dragoon, Phoenix Enforcer, and if they're going second, obviously they have more options. But it's just a very good card. It's a one-sided Macrocosmos. I think that's just a crazy enough thing. And then when your opponent searches, you get to banish a random card in their hand. Like really strong card.
That's a soft once per turn.
Yeah. So if you have multiple Darklaws, you can do that multiple times. And then obviously the one-sided Macrocosmos is just kind of crazy. Next is Winda. Winda's another one. It's like, I think Winda is definitely like in the S tier range.
Yeah.
She's so easy to summon.
Yeah.
She's so easy to summon. The Dogmatica engine, you sneeze and you get a Winda on the field. It's so easy. But that trap card made Winda way too easy to summon. It's almost unfair. So many decks can play Winda that have no business even playing Winda. Tier limits play Winda. Everybody plays Winda. Why wouldn't you play Winda? It just locks you summon it during your opponent's turn, lock them out of special summoning. It's incredibly annoying. She also can't be destroyed by card effects permanently. So Colossus protects himself once. This is just permanently cannot be destroyed by card effects. And this thing has some decent attack. It's like 22. That's a lot.
And while you can make the argument like, oh, you still get one special summon with the trap if you like attempt to activate like a Tenyi or Danger or something that like has to activate the summon, and then they just chain the trap, and then you're locked in. That's it. Because once she sees the summon, it's done for.
Yeah, and she plays around things like Dark Ruler. You can say, oh, you can just Dark Ruler. You already end on a board. Your opponent's going to Dark Ruler. Oh, cool, you Dark Ruler. Now you're going to activate that trap card. Then you're going to get the window on the field. So annoying. Next is Exterio. This is another one. I'll put it like next to Last Warrior. It's probably better than Last Warrior. In certain ways, they're kind of close because this one requires a lot more setup. This is another card. You would never, ever actually summon this legitimately. You would only summon this because you need to use Barkion and Naturia Beast to summon it. Its effects are crazy, but you will never naturally summon it. You will Waking the Dragons or Cyberstein it. You will never, like, there's never going to come a time where you're going to summon this. But that being said, it does have a pretty crazy effect. This one, we actually had a debate over whether we should even include this on the list. Technically, it's a negate, but it's an endless negate because it's not once per turn. All you have to do is just banish a card from your graveyard and then send a card off the top of your deck, and then you can negate a monster spell or trap, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, just a smaller trap. Yeah, because it adds the Barkion and the Barkion and the Churia effects into one, and then it's obviously much stronger than the two of them. Well, not much stronger. It's only 28. But still, it's just a stronger version that has more versatility. It's an incredibly good card. Yeah, I'll just put it there. Naturia Beast, I think, is somewhere in the area.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit higher because you're more likely to be able to negate spells, and he's easier to summon.
Yeah, well, yeah, he's much easier to summon.
In Earth.
And you don't have to have. See, the thing with Barkion is you need to have cards in your graveyard. I'm sorry, this is Exterio, it's not Barkion. The thing with Exterio is you need to have cards in your graveyard to do the negates. So if you have like 3 cards in your graveyard, that's 3 negates.
No, because you banish one and then you mill one.
You
so
banish.
As long as you have one card in your graveyard.
Oh, it's endless. Yeah. So as long as you have one, you're right. And but the thing with this one is, it's like endless. You don't have to have anything in your graveyard, and it's 2 cards. In a lot of decks, milling a lot of cards is actually really, really strong. Obviously, Tearlaments.
Well, it wouldn't
because
actually
it's cost, but it's good in like Lightsworn stuff like that. Anything where you just send cards to the graveyard, it's good. But you can mill important stuff and then use the graveyard effects. Obviously, it's a very strong card, but it just relies on do you have any Earth Tuners in your deck and Earth Monsters in your deck? That's the only problem with this card. It basically has to be summoned only in Earth-based decks with Earth-based Tuners, so it's kind of locked into certain attributes. It's obviously a very strong card. Barkion is less good. It's probably like C tier. Barkion is the same thing as Naturia Beast, but it's for trap cards. I'd say the other reason that there's 2 reasons that Barkion is less good. Number 1 is it's
you have to banish 2 from the graveyard.
Yeah, number 1, you have to banish 2 from the graveyard. Number 2, traps are not as prevalent in Yu-Gi-Oh as monsters. And number 3, because even if your opponent had traps, like let's say the impermanence, they'd imperm you on your turn. They're not going to wait for their turn and then imperm you. And oh, look, Barkion, sorry. Like that's one of the major issues there. And then obviously a lot of trap cards like counter traps can't even be responded to. So Barkion does nothing against them. He's kind of like, he doesn't really fit into any of the situation. I might even put him into D tier. There's really not a reason why you would ever really want to summon him, because again, you can negate most trap cards. Although you can negate trap cards, you can't negate the important trap cards, so it kind of sucks. Next is Shen Shen. Shen Shen is probably like, probably like A or B?
I'd say A just because it's generic.
Yeah, it is generic. Yeah, see, unlike Beast, this one's actually generic. None of these cards, if you know, none of these are generic cards. This is actually a generic card. It's just a level 9 synchro. It's probably the best level 9 generic synchro in the game. It doesn't require it doesn't require 3 materials to make, like Trishula, for example. And this Floodgate, basically any card sent from field to graveyard is banished instead. It's just a really good Floodgate to have access to, and this card can bring itself back by banishing 2 cards. Really good. Next is Ophion. This one is, it's tough to even put it anywhere.
I'd say it's gonna be low because it's restricted strictly to evil swarms or is swarm.
Yeah, you can only summon into swarm decks, and then it's just very specific. Level 5 or higher monsters can't be special summoned, which again is good in certain metas, right? So if you're playing, like a few months ago we had the meta with the Fallen of Albaz meta, right? This card is pretty good against Despia and Fallen of Albaz because, well, all of their fusions level 5 or higher. You summon this against them, it's like, it's tough. How do they play around it, right? So it's good against them. It's good against Sword Soul. All of their monsters are synchro monsters that are level 8, level 10, level 12. They have a level 12, right? The big one?
No. All the big ones are 10.
Oh, it's even better, right? So, yeah, even better. Level 10.
But then you summon this like, you'd summon this going turn 1, right? And then they're playing sprites.
Yeah, and then it's dead. So it just depends on the meta game. A lot of floodgates, as we will continue to say, just depend on the meta.
Even worse, Sky Strikers.
Yeah, Sky Strikers, this card's not doing anything. The Olive Link format, this card did nothing. Next is Murmel Abyss Megalo. This one's tough too. Abysskios.
Yeah, it's probably low because 2 level 7 waters is like basically only mermaids.
Yeah, it's basically locked into one deck, and then negates the face up. It detaches a material to negate all face up monsters that your opponent controls. that have less attack than this card. Again, it's just kind of like locked into a certain thing. And the thing is, to negate everything doesn't really matter, because most of the time it's an interruption. You're just going to negate one thing. The main floodgate effect of this card is that level 5 or higher monsters cannot attack, which again is like good against only a certain variety of decks, but really not great against a lot of decks. And that's the problem. It's like yeah, like if you're playing against Sword Soul, they can't attack, but they're just gonna make like a Baron and pop this, so it doesn't really matter. And they could just negate like that other effect. So yeah, generally speaking, this card is kind of like iffy. It just depends on the situation. Sprite.
Gigantic Sprite.
Yeah. Gigantic Sprite is probably somewhere in A tier. So basically, this lets you summon a level 2 from your deck. You're locked into level 2s. And then the drawback, or the supposed drawback, is that both players are locked into level 2s, which is kind of like a floodgate for both players. A little bit odd, but like it's a floodgate that actually helps you as the player of this deck a lot, because it doesn't matter if you're locked in level 2s, you're playing a level 2 deck. But them getting locked into level 2s sucks, because now they can't Nibiru you.
And they can't use a few niche effects too, like the
Psy-frame.
Well, they would just gamma this, but if they waited too long, if they're playing the whole Psy-frame deck, then they're not doing much of anything. But it also hits the tier limit card, the one that he summons himself and then mills.
Yeah.
So like if you mill like other tier limits, you're not gonna be able to fusion summon, because there's no fusion in your deck that's level 2, or like what's it called, like random things like Sword Soul Iris, or like the random little things that special summon themselves. And sometimes so obviously going first, it's decent, but like late game when you have like floating effects and whatnot, it really hurts seeing this when you have like some kind of floating effect, or like a trap set that'll like summon something back, things like that. It's a very huge inconvenience.
Very good against Sky Strikers, actually.
Yeah, actually someone summoned this against me. I was playing Sue Ships, and the field spell floats, but I couldn't do it.
Yeah, it's good. It's really strong. Next is True King. True King is probably like an S tier. We were actually questioning whether we should even include True King and the Abyss Dweller, because technically they're lingering effects. They're kind of floodgates, but they're kind of lingering effects. Obviously, True King is very good. Detach a material and negate all change the attribute of all monsters on the field to a certain attribute, and then negate that attribute for the rest of the turn. Anything your opponent summons becomes that attribute, and they can't attack. So it's kind of crazy. It's the fact that it's a lingering effect means that it actually plays around in a lot of ways better than other floodgates. Like, you couldn't skill drain this. So if everyone skill drains, okay, cool, chain this, and now for the rest of the turn they're locked out of whatever it is you chose to lock them out of.
And then they have to play around the skill drain.
And then they also have to play around the skill drain. Yeah, so this card is like really, really, really strong. Obviously, it's banned, I think, everywhere, right? Master Duel, TCG, OCG. Like, this card is literally banned everywhere. It's really, really, really strong. Anytime you have a level 9 deck, it's very frustrating. It makes Virtual World an actually like really good deck. So definitely S tier there. Baguska's another one, probably an A tier.
Because of how simple,
so generic.
2 level 4s.
Yeah. It really depends on the meta. So Baguska is the biggest thing with Baguska is what meta is it? If there's are a lot of Link decks, Baguska is not very good. Konami, for some reason, I don't know what the reason for this timing is, but the second set of Link format Baguska came out, so Baguska never really got a chance to shine in those years, because it just changes monsters to defense position and then negates their effects, but they have to change the defense position to get their effects negated. Link monsters don't change the defense position, so they keep their effects. So they released it at the worst time that it could have been released. They could have released it, like years earlier, and it would have had a huge impact on the game. But now this card is having a huge resurgence because Links have actually fallen out of favor to a large degree, and most of the best decks right now are fusion decks, XYZ decks, also synchro decks. So this card's really making a hard comeback, and it's so easy to summon. It's just any 2 level 4s. It's outrageous. Really, really strong. And then its attack position effect is that it protects itself. So both effects are actually kind of good. Abyss Dweller is another one. I think this is an A tier card. It's super generic. Any 2 level 4s, detach, and then for the rest of the turn, neither player can activate graveyard effects, which is getting pretty
it's
crazy.
actually just your opponent.
Even better, a one-sided floodgate. Only your opponent can't activate graveyard effects. Really strong. Nightmare Corruptor Iblee is probably like high B tier. She's a really good card. She's, again, another card making a resurgence now. Basically, what this card does is, if it's sent to the graveyard, you can summon it to your opponent's side of the field, and then while this monster is on the field, the controller of the monster cannot special summon unless they link summon, which is really, really annoying. Because you just summon this onto your opponent's field, and now they're locked into links, essentially. So if they're not playing a link deck, it's a really strong card. If they are playing a link deck, you just gave them a free material for whatever they're going to do.
But if they don't have any generic links, then it gets a little complicated.
Yeah.
That's like another like kind of iffy thing about it.
Yeah. And it's just, that's really the issue with it. It really depends on the format. It's not generically good. But it is good. They're actually playing it in Sprite right now because it is a level 2. Next, we've got the barrier statues. I'm actually going to put all the barrier statues together real quick so that we can review them all in order. Just put them all together. Alright, so first we've got the water barrier statue. The water barrier statue, I think, is probably around like B tier. Like, it's a good barrier statue, but it's not like the most outrageous.
Yeah, there's still a few waters here and there.
Yeah, there's still water decks, Marincess, stuff like that. Obviously, some of the tier limits are waters. There's some decent water monsters out there. Light barrier statue, I think, is probably like around C tier. Again, there's a decent amount of light decks that pop up here and there. Like
Drytron still pops up.
Yeah, Drytron. You look at the history of Yu-Gi-Oh! There have been quite a few light decks that are actually kind of decent. Wind barrier statue is really good. Wind barrier statue, again, the worse the attribute, the better the barrier statue.
Wind barrier statue has been like
it's
dominating for
meta relevant for
like 2 years now.
Yeah.
Ever since Samorg came out with Tri Brigades and all that.
Yeah.
And then Samorg got hit, and then Flu and Reese has been abusing it.
Yeah.
It's kind of wild actually, like back to back.
Yeah. No, the reason this one is so good is because no one uses wind monsters. Tier limits don't use them. Sprites don't use them. As a matter of fact, you look at the meta decks that have been meta relevant in the last few years. Nobody uses them. Nobody really uses wind monsters, except for Flunderees, and Flunderees don't special summon, so it doesn't even hurt them. You're playing the mirror match. Oh, cool, no problem. You don't even stress about it. But yeah, this one is actually very, very strong. We've got the Earth Barrier statue. I'd say Earth is.
I think it's like low A tier, because there's not that many like
Earth decks.
Not as many Earths, but then at the same time, it's not as like easily summonable.
Yeah, it's not. That's why I don't think it's 8, because it's very difficult to summon. Like, actually, you can summon it in like Adamancipators and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can summon it in Adamancipators, but then it kind of locks you out of Synchro Place. That's kind of the issue with it. Other than Adamancipators, there's not a lot of decks that you can summon. You could play it in Rockstun. But if this card just had easier access, like, it's outrageously easy to summon the Wind Barrier statue. Flunderees, you just search it for fun. You search it, extra normal summon, here you go, enjoy it. And then your opponent summons something, you rise a spin it back. You're just in an eternal circle of hell. But yeah, this one has too much support. Next, we've got the Fire Barrier statue. Fire Barrier statue is supposed to be here. Nobody plays fire decks. There's no good fire decks. The only decent one is Salamangrates. In the last few years, there hasn't been any good fire decks. But today is not that tier list.
Actually, Infernoble Knights.
Infernoble Knights they lost one equip spell and they're gone.
Yeah.
This is supposed to be here. Like, if you could consistently summon the Fire Barrier statue, no one would ever play Yu-Gi-Oh again. No one would be able to summon anything ever again. If Flunderees if this was a wing beast, a lot of people would be in serious trouble. But unfortunately, there really isn't any way to summon this card. I don't know any fire decks. Oh, actually, I'm sorry. You can play Volcanics, and then you can activate Ties of the Brethren, and you can summon this and 2 Volcanics, and then your opponent will normal summon a monster and attack over them. And your whole plan has been foiled. That's the problem with this one. This is the best barrier statue by far, but the most difficult one to summon by far. So I'm putting it into B tier. Next is Draco. This is the Kawakimaru Draco.
Wait, we're missing the Dark Barrier statue.
Alright, I'm sorry. It's
here.
right here. It goes in F tier. Literally does nothing.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to tell you guys. Dark is the most populous attribute in the entire game of Yu-Gi-Oh! The best decks in the game are dark. They've always been dark. And most of the time, if you summon a Dark Barrier statue, your opponent just looks at you like, you wasted your time. And then they just go through a full tier limit line. Next is Kawakimaru Draco, which is extremely situational. It's probably a D or a C tier card. Probably say
Really
C
that
tier.
low?
See, he's like situated. He's good against light and dark decks, and you can only really summon him in Dragon Link if you tribute Erratic Seal of Heavenly Spheres. You used to be able to summon him off of LP and stuff, but obviously LP's gone. There's not a lot of generic ways to summon a dragon monster out of your deck like there used to be. So that's why. Like, this card used to be a lot better because you could just spit him out onto the field, and then what does he like negate? It negates light and dark effects, or your opponent can't activate. Neither player can summon light or dark monsters, which is pretty good. Again, like, that's good against a lot of decks because those are the best types in the game. But how do you summon this card is the answer, is the question. Because it's just a semi-searchable level 4 dragon monster that is like, yeah, like, how are you going to get it onto the field? You could play Kawakimaru, the Kawakimaru search spell to search this and then normal summon it, but like, okay, great, you have a 1900 monster on the field. What more are you going to do with it? Like, it has certain good applications, but it's like not the total best. Next is Denko Sekka. I think this card's probably like A tier. It's really fallen out of the metagame recently because there aren't a lot of back row decks. A lot of back row decks now are just like it's like normal summon. No, they'll activate Mystic Mine and they'll just sit on a Mystic Mine. So whether you're playing Altergeist or Altergeist or Sky Strikers or Eldritch, or like, it doesn't matter what Runic, pure Runic, it doesn't matter what back row deck you're playing, they're just going to activate Mystic Mine, and then Denko Sekka really doesn't do anything. Denko Sekka is very good against set 5 pass as long as they don't have the Judgment, but if they do have the Judgment, or if they're just playing Mystic Mine, this card just is not that great. But generally speaking, against most back row decks, if you summon this card, you basically win. But it's not a very back row heavy metagame. When it is, this card will be better. Inspector Board is probably another like A tier card. It takes so much brain power to figure out what this card does. Your opponent will probably just scoop and go to game 2. The effect is extremely confusing, but basically you summon it, and then your opponent can only activate one monster effect, and if they want to activate additional monster effects, they have to summon additional links, XYZs, synchros, whatever the case may be, to activate additional cards. This plus other floodgates, other traps, other negates in combination are just extremely frustrating to play through. Karushin, again, is one of those things that it just depends on the metagame. Probably somewhere in B tier. Basically what this card does is it makes it so both players can only control one monster that isn't water. So you summon this, and it's a continuously applied effect. Just like any floodgate, your opponent has to send monsters to the graveyard until they control one monster that is a non-water. Really good for removal, really good floodgate generally, but it just depends on the metagame and how good water monsters are at that time. Right now, water monsters aren't that strong, so this card will probably be pretty strong. But it really depends. You really have to build an entire deck around this card. If you're not, then it's just not that good. It's Concentrated Light.
That's one.
Yeah.
Only lights.
Yeah, only lights can be. No, darks can't be special summoned, right?
Yeah, neither player can no special summon darks.
I probably say
or
this
declare
is.
an attack with a dark.
I'd probably say this is like a C
And it
tier
can be
card.
destroyed by battle wide dark.
Like, it's
And
again
battle damage.
very specific. It has to be against lights. It's not a broad floodgate like a lot of these other ones. Again, you'd have to build a deck around it, and it's only good against darks. Yes, darks are the best type in the the best attribute in the game. But again, it's like, okay, you normal summon this. This is a 100 attack monster. They can just attack over it as long as it's not a dark.
Yeah.
You can attack over it as long as it's not a dark. They can Forbidden Droplets. So, like, there's so many ways to get around this one card. Imperm, destroy it with a generic card effect. It has no protection for itself like a Winda or Thunder Dragon Colossus. So it's just kind of an okay card. Next is this Zebra thing. Alright, next is Zap Mustang. Zap Mustang is a weird one. I want to say it's in F tier just because it's so specific how you have to summon this card. So basically, you have to summon. You can't normal summon this card. It's a Thunder monster, 1600 attack. You cannot normal summon it. You have to special summon it with a card effect. So already that's kind of bad. Like you have to find another card to activate to summon this card. So that's already problem number 1. Problem number 2, yeah, that's the last monster you'll be able to special summon. You can't special summon other monsters when you summon this thing. It has the only floodgate it has is that it can't.
Whole turn.
You
can't summon the whole turn.
Oh, the whole turn. So this is basically the only monster you're summoning, and you have to have another monster to summon this card. So this card has 2 effects, which is this can't be destroyed by battle 2 times per turn, and on top of that, your opponent can only special summon up to the number of times that they declared attacks. So all they'd have to do is just enter the battle, normal summon a monster, enter the battle phase, attack this thing, and then main phase 2, they can just special summon once, and you really didn't gain anything but protect yourself for 1 turn. It's really a very weird one and not so good card. Amato Wado is insane. Really good card. It doesn't work in a lot of decks, and that's kind of the problem with Amato Wado. But this is a continuously applied effect that basically prevents monsters from being activated. It's absolutely insane. Also, this card returns to the field to your hand during the end of the turn, which is like a mandatory effect. This card is really, really, really crazy. You can just normal summon it, and then no one can activate any hand traps whatsoever. You do all of your various spell effects. It's very good in True Dracos. You normal summon it, do all of your spell effects. Your opponent can't negate any of them. Card of Demise, all of the destruction effects. You can do all that stuff while this thing's on the field. End phase, this returns back to your hand, and then during your opponent's turn, you can activate all of your True Draco monsters with no problems. Next turn, you should normal summon this back out. Really good card as long as you can play it in your deck. Obviously, this is like one of the best Spirit cards to ever come out. Morphage. Which one is this? Sloth.
Well, he's kind of just to represent like a lot of the Morphage cards, because a lot of them work the same.
Yeah, a lot of the Morphage cards do the same thing, which is that when they're on the field, neither player can special summon monsters from the extra deck other than the Morphage cards. Obviously, these Morphage cards have had a significant amount of meta impact. I probably put it somewhere in B tier. Yeah, a lot of them have had meta impact over the years. Basically, they just prevent special summons. You summon them in a variety of ways. You can summon them off of the Guard Dragons. You can summon them off of the Heretic Seal of Heavenly Spheres. You can also summon them off of... it used to be able to summon off of Dark Matter Dragon, because you could send the Arc Brave and then special summon this thing. You used to be able to do a variety of a variety of different tricks that you can do, but obviously all of those tricks are for the most part gone, other than Heretic Seal of Heavenly Spheres. But pretty good there. Next is Majesty's, or is this? Let me look a little closer. Majesty's Fiend. Yeah, Majesty's Fiend is the one that stops monster effects. Continuously stops monster effects. I'd probably say it's somewhere in like B tier. It really, again, it's just one of those cards that it's like Amato Iwado, but it's a little bit worse than Amato Iwado because it's just not as easy to summon because it's a tribute monster. So the only decks that can really play it are like, you wouldn't really play this in True Dracos, but you can play this in Monarchs, and that's pretty much it. But when it is out, it's great. But the problem is you can really only summon it in that. Next is Fossil Dyna. Fossil Dyna is probably like high B tier. Like, it's a really good card. It just has very niche applications. It's not like a generic Floodgate that any deck can play. You have to build a deck around it. You're playing a full anti-meta deck. You're not going to play it in all decks. Again, the B tier is kind of cards that are really good, but requires you to build an entire deck around them. But as a Floodgate, very, very strong. If your opponent attacks into this, they basically lose their entire board unless they have a negate left. So really strong card there. Majesty's Fiend, one of my favorite cards, but again, it's just extremely niche applications.
Oh, Vanity C.
Vanities Fiend is extremely niche applications. It's very good against certain decks. It's not generic. I mean, not that it's good against certain decks. It's good against almost all decks other than like Flunderies. But the problem with this card, again, is the issue with it is you have to literally build a deck around it. But it is a very strong floodgate because it stops almost any deck. Both players can't special summon. And the problem is, again, the only deck I've ever used this in is like a Tenyi deck. Also, you know, obviously Monarchs can use this card pretty easily.
It is a pretty good side deck card though.
Great side deck card.
Yeah, I tried it in Cyber Dragons. Someone did it to me online. I was like, that's a great idea. I'll try it out. It's similar to what you do too. And yeah, when you have like Cyber Dragon Infinity and this guy on the field, it's like it's hard to come back from that, because if you try to impermit Cyber Dragon Infinity, it's like little things like that. Like it comes out of nowhere, and it's really hard to get rid of.
Really good side deck card, but again, it's just, it really depends on what's going on. This card's really good. Christia.
I think
He's another one. You got to build a deck around him.
Yeah, and even he's like, what makes him cool is that he's searchable.
Yeah.
Like a lot of the other floodgates don't have that kind of like
yeah,
luxury.
Benton.
Yeah, Benton.
Can search him. And he special summons himself.
Yeah, he can be special summoned.
That's the important
general
part.
Like
yeah.
a lot of these also cannot be special summoned. He's
Yeah.
searchable, can be special summoned, but even with all that, even fairy decks don't play him that often. It's fun to splash him in, but he
Going second, he's a little weak.
he's very weak going second. Well, he's actually got a lot of attack, but 28's kind of big.
Yeah.
But
No, the problem is he doesn't have an effect that like prevents like monster activations or something like that.
Mhm.
So he's really only good going first, because then it prevents your opponent's special summoning. Whereas like Karu Shin, you know, it sends everything that's not a water to the graveyard except one card. Well, this card is just gonna stop from special summon. They have a full board.
and on top of that, it is a weird effect of when it leaves the field, it goes to the top of the deck.
Yeah.
So once they out your board,
You're stuck
not
drawing it.
Yeah, you're not top decking into anything crazy. And once they've already outed your most likely other fairy board, you're not going to be able to special summon them.
Because you
Again,
have
'cause you have more than four fairies in the
It
graveyard.
has to be exactly 4 fairies. And if it's more, then you can. If it's less, you can't. Thunder King Ryo's another one. Really good card. Probably somewhere in like top of B tier. It's a really strong card. It just requires the right metagame. It's completely out of the metagame right now. Nobody plays it. It's actually still kind of an expensive card. Probably because of Edison format. But yeah, it's a good card. It basically stops searching. It stops both players from searching, and then on top of that, it has an effect where if someone, it was special summons or normal summons.
Yeah, if
Yeah.
when your opponent would special summon exactly one, you can send them to the graveyard.
Yep, and then
Negate
negate that summon, which is pretty good. Again, it's cool. It's a negate. But the problem is, it just it's just too slow for the game.
Well, what I never understood though is that effect really that useful? Because the main thing about him is that you want him to be there.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, then now I can't add, and then you try to special summon something, and you get rid of what they special summon, but then they can add all over again. I never understood that.
Well, the whole point of that effect is if they summon something that's it's definitely going to out this for sure. You can just tribute it and get rid of that monster, so you get something out of it.
Fair enough.
So if they special summon like a Cyber Dragon, you're like, oh crap, tribute, negate the summon. So you get something for it. You floodgate them, and if that goes wrong, then you can. It's like an eject button. Yeah. It's a 1-for-1 if they have a way to out it. Next is Vanities. Is it? All these
Vanities Ruler.
Vanities. They all have some weird names. Which one is this one? Your opponent can't special summon monsters. So these two right here are single tributes. This one is 2 tribute. I'd probably say this is more in like C tier. It's not a bad card by any means, because most decks that would be able to summon these two would still be able to summon this one. Again, just like these two, this can't be special summoned. It has to be normal summoned.
Tribute summon.
Well, tribute summoned because it is that level, unless you reduce the level somehow. But most likely you're most likely double cost down. You're most likely going to tribute summon this, which in certain decks like Drytron, if you end on like loose monsters and you haven't used your normal summon, this card's like pretty decent. But most of the time, even in Drytrons, you have the Herald of the Herald Girl. You're gonna normal summon that thing most of the time. There's just not a lot of decks that this can be squeezed into. Obviously you can play it like Monarchs, but other than Monarchs, like this card really doesn't see a ton of play.
But another thing that is cool about him is that if you could search for Christia, you could search for this because they can both be searched by Ben 10. So in some applications, instead of playing the Christia, if you don't use your summon, your normal summon, then you contribute summon this, and it doesn't hurt you in any way. It only locks your opponent from special summoning because Christia is both, and then it also what's it called? It doesn't float it. It doesn't stack itself. So in some ways it could be better, but it can't be special summon. So it's like that's a pretty big thing.
Yep. Next is Jinzo. Jinzo is a tough one. So Jinzo is probably like in C tier. This used to be an amazing card, but certain cards age well and certain cards do not age well. So, like the Wind Barrier statue has aged very well because Konami has continued to support it. And even if they don't mean to support this card exactly, this card continues to become relevant. Winda's another example of that, right? This Winda came out in what, like 2016, and it's still relevant in 2022. It's still a good card. Every time there's banlist discussion, people want to see it banned. They're frustrated with it. Whereas Jinzo, nobody cares. At one point, Jinzo was limited to one. It was one of the best cards in the entire game. Negated all trap cards. There's two reasons why this card's not good. Number one, it's a level 6 monster. Number two, and most importantly, trap cards are just not that strong in the game right now. The best trap cards are trap cards that activate from the hand, essentially during your turn. Stuff like Imperm. So, by the time you summon Jinzo, they would have already activated the Imperm. Now it's their turn, and they just don't use trap cards, because trap cards are the least used cards in the entire game of Yu-Gi-Oh! That's kind of the issue there. Next is M-Pen. M-Pen is...
I'd say A tier.
Like lower A tier.
Yeah, he's
good. All special summon monsters in attack position are negated. Or can't activate their effects, right? It's one of the two. Either they're negated or I think they just can't activate their effects. It's one of the two, but the point is that's what it does. Basically, their effects are not going to be usable. And then on top of that, you can, banish cards from your hand? Or...
Yeah, you can banish one from your hand and half whatever monster he does battle with.
Yeah, so even if they try to attack over this in some way, you're going to annoy them. It's 2800 attack, or 2700 attack, which is already a lot, and then they're going to cut you in half, which is, again, very annoying.
Yeah, he has 3 effects, and they're all, like, extremely good.
Yep. And here's the good thing, right? He's very easy to summon, so even though he's a 2 tribute monster, because he's in Flunderies, that's irrelevant. He's very, very, very good. It doesn't really matter. You're definitely going to summon him. That's the problem with these two. These 3 aren't as easy to summon because they're not as generic as he is.
And they're not searchable.
And then he's like searchable with Eaglin, so he's easy to summon. Next is probably like high B tier, which is Destiny Hero Plasma. This card is basically like a skill drain, but it's a one-sided skill drain for in hero decks. It's just very good, and on top of that, it's skill drain fused with Thousand Eyes Restrict because it takes a monster and it equips it to itself. Yeah, it gains the monster's half of the monster's attack, and it's a skill drain, so it's a pretty good card. Again, the only issue with it is it takes just 3 tributes, so
which is like,
it's not hard in heroes, but you're really only going to play this in heroes, and it's only if you have like a good hand. The good thing is you only have to play 1, so if you know you're going to have like, oh, this is, usually when you're playing heroes, like, okay, this is a really good hand, I'm going to get to this, I can search it. But sometimes obviously you have kind of hands that are a little bit shaky, and you end up on like 1 Dark Law, you don't want to summon this thing. Next is Spell Canceller.
One thing that is worth mentioning, he is technically splashable now, because it never says you have to tribute 3 heroes. You can just tribute 3 monsters, and with the new card that specifically searches him, he could technically see some splash play, but we haven't seen any yet. But hopefully we do, because he is kind of cool.
He is kind of cool. Maybe one day. Next is Spell Canceller. I have to put Spell Canceller lower than Jinzo. This card really, like, this, as far as I ever knew, this card really only saw play during the format where Mystic Mind came out, and it was at absolute full power, and people were actually legitimately playing this card in their side deck. Other than that, over the entire lifespan of Yu-Gi-Oh, I really don't see this. I have not seen this card get a lot of play. This card, the problem with it is it's a 1 tribute monster. It negates all spell cards, and then your opponent cannot activate spell cards. So it's like Jinzo in a lot of ways, but the problem is it's 1800 attack. That's it. That's the only issue with it. It's an 1800 attack Jinzo. And 2400 attack and 1800 attack are huge differences. Because 1800 attack is it's weak. Especially for a 1 tribute monster. Like, this is a normal summon, it'd be fine. But the problem with it being a 1 tribute monster is that's a lot to give up. You're giving up a normal summon. You have to have a monster on board to summon it in the first place. Then you summon it. It's a lot to ask for a monster that's so weak. It could just be run over by any... Most decks have a 1900 attacker at least. I mean, we're talking about a Gemini Elf running over this, and it's 2022. Most decks have a monster that's stronger than 1800 on normal summon. Next is Kaiko. This one has a Floodgate effect, but again, I don't see this card like seeing a lot of play. Basically, it prevents your opponent from banishing from the graveyards. From either graveyards. It's not a bad effect. Funny enough, like, a lot of people don't even know about this effect in general. Like, they just remember the effect of Kaiko that banishes 2 cards out of your opponent's graveyard, but they actually forget this Floodgate effect that it's even on there. But yeah, basically it prevents your opponent from banishing from either player's graveyard. Again, the issue with this effect is, while it's a good effect, this card really doesn't have like a home or a deck where it's available to play. Like, it's not a bad card at all. But it just really doesn't see any meta play, just because it's not particularly easy to summon. Maybe in the right format it might see some play, but obviously not right now. This card is Dijin, Ritual of, what is it, Destroyers or something like that?
I think it's like Releaser.
Releaser or Rituals. This card's really good. Might even be S tier. It's kind of insane. If you use it for a Ritual summon, your opponent can't special summon as long as you have that Ritual monster on the field. So that's just insane. Can you imagine like Drytrons with this card? I might even put this, honestly, this probably deserves to be an S tier. Can you even imagine Drytrons with this? They just summon like a Drytron monster using this card, and then you just kind of sit on this thing, and whatever monster you have your Herald with like its unlimited negates just sitting on the board, and every time they try to out the monster, you just negate it, and they can't special summon anything in the meantime. It'd be extremely frustrating to play through. There's a reason why this card is on the ban list. Actually, Winda's probably here. I probably overdid it. This True King so far is probably the best Floodgate we have. Dark Simorg. What does this do? Like, prevent you from setting spells and traps?
I believe that was it.
This one is probably like in C tier. This card, again, just kind of depends.
Actually, they can't set cards.
They can't set... No one's setting monsters, but yeah, you can't set cards.
Well, yeah, if you manage to get this and the warrior from another planet...
Oh boy. Well, you can't. You just get destroyed.
You gotta find a way.
You gotta find a way.
You gotta negate his effects for a turn, and then tribute summon this.
But Dark Simorg is it's good in niche applications. It's like a cool tech option sometimes in Fluendaries, but generally Fluendaries are better when they don't play it. If you ever manage to play anti-spell on this card, you are doing more than you should. All right, next is Warlock of the Ice Barrier. This card is okay. It's like a D tier. It is a... The problem is this card's stats suck. So basically what this card does is both players cannot activate spell cards the turn they have to set spell cards before they activate them. So it's basically like an anti-spell but on a monster. The monster is 400 attack and 1000 defense. Like, that's so bad. Why is it so weak? You have to have some sort of like lightning rod effect, some sort of other interruption to like destroy your opponent's like normal summon, whatever you need, because they can just attack over. This thing is just so weak. You need to like play all of these other things just to make this card decent. Next is Bamboo Shoot. This card is actually good. It's a card that for years people were trying to break. I think soon it's gonna be broken because there's new stuff coming out for it, so I don't want to rate it too low. It's probably somewhere in B tier. Its effect is crazy. Basically, if you control this monster that was tribute summoned, neither player...
By tributing in Naturia.
By tributing in Naturia, so you have to play it in Naturia's. Your opponent cannot activate spells and traps, so that is insane. Its stats are 2000, 2000. That's a decent card. Most normal summons aren't getting over that. But your opponent still can special summon, so you have to summon something in addition to this. But honestly, just because Naturias are historically such a bad archetype, this card is just too difficult to pull off. When this card came out, everyone was trying to break it, and to this day, it's been years and years and years since the Dual Terminal series have come out. I've never seen anyone successfully break this card, although it is a very broken card. Literally, your opponent can activate spells and traps. Are locked out of 2/3 of the game, but unfortunately not monsters, which are probably what's going to get over this. Alright, next is Naturia Rose Whip. This card's not particularly difficult to summon. It's decent. I probably say like high C tier. Basically, your opponent can only activate one spell trap card per turn. Again, the issue is it's 400 attack, 1700 defense. How do you put this on the board? It's a generic plant monster, so it's not like the most difficult monster to summon onto the board. You could probably play like Sun Avalons and Rikas, and there's easier ways to do it. Lone Fire Blossom. Obviously, there's some decent ways to put this card onto the board. It's just its stats are just kind of weak. So sometimes having a Floodgate effect on a weak monster, even if it's easy to summon, isn't the best, just because you could just normal summon attack over it. And then if you don't have additional protection available to you, sometimes it's not good enough. Alright, next is General Wayne. Basically what this card does is any spell and trap card sent from the field to the graveyard, to your opponent's graveyard, is banished. It's like a one-way macro cosmos only for spell and trap cards.
It's opposite dimensional fissure.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. It's opposite dimensional fissure only for your opponent. But you have to keep in mind, like, yeah, in modern Yu-Gi-Oh, a lot of spawn trap cards float, but there's still a lot of spawn trap cards that just don't really float. They don't do anything. Like, you activate your opponent activates Twin Twisters, it gets banished, it's irrelevant. They activate, I don't know, like Harpy's Feather Duster, it gets banished, it's irrelevant. Like, it's still irrelevant against a lot of effects. It's not particularly difficult to summon because it's made for the new Ice Barrier support, but it's not the best card ever. Next is the medium of the Ice Barrier. This is another one that there are ways to break it, like with Saryuja and stuff, but it's just not the best card. It basically makes it so your opponent can only special summon or activate one spawn trap card per turn. But it's level 7. It's 2200 attack. Like, its stats aren't particularly good. If you can summon it off of Saryuja, it's decent, but honestly, I think Rose Whip is better, and Rose Whip isn't that good. Like, the problem with these cards is their stats kind of suck, and they're put on these monsters where, like, it locks your opponent into something, but as long as they can activate one spawn trap card, they can out this card. It doesn't really matter that they can only activate one spawn trap card. Like, if you summon this and their one spawn trap card activation is an imperm, it doesn't, like, it's over. Like, it's, or Raigeki, or Forbidden Droplets. Like, it's cool to lock your opponent into one spawn trap card if they're playing, like, a deck that activates a ton of spawn trap cards and none of them out this card. But in most cases, they'll just out this card with whatever spawn trap card they have. Next is Wizard. Which one does this prevent again? This
He's like a Abyss Dweller for your opponent's monsters.
Yeah.
When he's equipped, of course.
Yeah, so you equip it to a Buster Blader. Honestly, there's a better equip, which is the Destruction Buster Sword. Destruction Buster Sword, when it was legal, when Union Carrier was legal, was a very strong card. Without Union Carrier, it's almost impossible to get it onto a monster. If you're playing in Buster Blader, it's not even that easy to get it onto a Buster Blader. So honestly, it's probably like bottom of B tier. If Union Carrier comes back and it's generic, you just put it up here because it's a really strong card. But it really depends on whether Union Carrier is in the metagame. Just like a lot of these cards are contingent on a variety of different characteristics. That being one of those cards. Next is what is it, Retaliating C or?
Yeah, Retaliating C. This one's a little like specific. Like some of the C's are like not that specific. When your opponent activates a spell that includes the effect of special summoning a monster, you can special summon this guy, and then it's basically a macrocosmos for both players. So
this card again is good in certain matchups and in certain metagames.
In against traditional fusion decks, it's really good.
Yeah. Like,
you activate any fusion spell, you can chain this, and then if it's like a fusion, typically they're gonna fuse from the deck. So you activate this against Shadalls.
Yeah. This is a really good option against them.
Yeah, it's a really strong, like,
really good.
They're gonna banish whatever they send, and then they what's it called? They don't get the effects. They get to summon a monster, summon what construct.
Yeah. And then what? Send? It's getting banished.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's really good against traditional fusion decks. Unfortunately, we are past that era. That era is gone. Obviously, Destiny Fusion is gone. I mean, it's in the meta, but without Verde, nobody plays it. Red Ice Fusion, nobody plays it. what other fusions are there? There's
Neos Fusion.
Neos Fusion. Nobody plays it. Shadal Fusion. Nobody plays those cards, even though they're really good, and this would be a good side deck option against them. The best fusion deck in the game is Tier Limits. Tier Limits don't play this because they can just fuse with things that don't even make sense. With graveyard effects of monsters.
It's good against. It's actually pretty decent now because Branded Fusion is kind of running around.
Yeah, when Branded Fusion's around, this card's decent, but it just depends on the meta game. But most of the time, it's like iffy.
One thing that is cool about it, if you are playing an insect deck, you can actually search it off of Goki Bowl.
Off of Goki Bowl, yeah. Actually, against Branded, it's not like the best thing ever because Branded has.
They have banished effects.
Yeah, they have not only they have banished effects, they don't really care if their cards get banished. Like they can play around Macrocosmos and stuff. Next is Deus Ex, the best crawler card. Is only a C tier.
Actually, they have the one that mills, right?
Yeah, the best. Yeah, they have another.
That's what Egg was saying earlier.
Yeah, this card's pretty good.
Yeah, when he's flipped face up, while in the monster zone, he negates all monster effects your opponent activates on the field.
Yeah,
it's like skill drain, but 3,000 defense.
Yeah, pretty decent. Yeah, it's just you have to build a deck around them basically, just like the Naturia.
And unfortunately, the deck you're not building around him is crawlers.
It's a problem. Next C.
He's also level 9, which makes me
Flying C.
Flying C.
Yep. It's by the refrigerator.
The controller cannot XYZ summon. So you summon this to your opponents.
Yeah. This card is probably like F tier. It's very specific. It's only good against XYZ
Utopia.
decks. Yeah. It's good against only XYZ decks, and there aren't any pure XYZ decks right now. Every deck is pretty much blended, so they'll just do something else. That's the problem with that one.
And then there's the other C.
Contact C. This one comes up like every once in a while in the metagame, but not like super consistently. But every different meta, it actually becomes somewhat relevant.
It's like Nightmare Iblee, but like it's like easier to summon, but easier to get rid of.
Yeah. Basically, when your opponent summons a monster, you can summon this to your opponent's side of the field, and then this card cannot be used for fusion, synchro, XYZ, or link material. So
no. It can be used for all those, but they have to do those.
Yeah. Which
is like they can just once they normal summon or special summon a monster, they just link to like IP or something.
Yeah. So it's good against certain things. You know what it was good against a few months ago, or I guess like a year ago now. It was good against Zodiacs, because they would summon a Zodiac, you'd summon this to their board, and then they're basically playing a bunch of XYZ monsters.
I was thinking you summon a level 4 tuner, and they summon this to your field. You make a Barone. Because the level 6 is so weird.
Yeah, but it's very specifically good.
Honestly, if they made him like a crazy level, like if they made him like level 12. Like he'd be a little bit hard to get rid of because you couldn't synchro or XYZ with him.
Yeah. Next is Chaos Hunter.
Your opponent cannot banish cards.
Yeah, your opponent cannot banish cards. This card, again, is one of those ones that comes into the meta every once in a while. It's an easy monster to summon because basically if your opponent special summons, you can discard a card, special summon this card from your hand, and then your opponent cannot banish cards. So you can summon it during your opponent's turn. In a certain way, it's like a hand trap. And it's good against a lot of different decks, but again, it just depends on how good it is in the metagame, how often it comes back. It's just a better Kaiko. It's a Kaiko that special summons itself during either player's turn. Yeah, pretty good card. A Banisher of Light, I think, is like somewhere around here. It's a 100 attack monster. Any card sent to the graveyard is banished instead. 100 attack, 2,000 defense. Like, dude, this card is just not. Its stats just suck, and your opponent's normal summon attack over this stupid 100 attack monster. This thing is 1,600 attack, and again, doesn't really ever see play. 1,600 attack, same effect essentially. Any card sent to the graveyard is banished instead. Hasn't seen play in years. Yeah, it's good. Like it's like Dimensional Shifter, but unfortunately, it just hasn't seen a lot of play, even though it is a good continuous effect. Next is Necros of the Unicorn. This card is probably in like high B tier. It's if you can summon this, what does that have, like 2,000 attack, 2,300 attack? If you can summon this using the Digin, it's oh my god. Your opponent can't activate monsters. Special summon from the extra deck. That's basically what it negates. It negates monsters special summon from the extra deck. Pretty good, especially if you could summon like 2 Necrozs, Unicorns. It's pretty good. It's a pretty good strong Floodgate. Carried Necros for many, many years. Legendary Ocean as a Floodgate isn't too great. It is technically a Floodgate because it reduces the level of all water monsters on both players' side of the field in both hands by 1. So technically, if they are playing, for example, the Frog Engine, all their frogs become
anything.
Huh?
Those frogs aren't doing
not
anything.
Right now because of Ronin Tonin getting.
No. I mean, like if you have like the legendary ocean.
Yeah, if you have the legendary ocean and you're playing against sprites and they're using the frog engine, all of them become level 1.
They actually can't even summon. Wait, no. Because once they hit the field, then that's when it like.
What?
Because I'm saying I was thinking like off of like a gigantic sprite, but it's from the deck, so it's level 2. Yeah.
So they can summon them from the deck, but they'll become level 1, and then they can't play them. Next is... This is Level Limit Area B. This card is not good anymore. It was good a long time ago, but this card's time has passed. And basically, any monster that's level 4 or higher gets changed to defense position. Obviously, that was good back in 2004, when you could change everything to defense position, and every time... And basically play like a stall deck or a burn deck or a trap deck. You play some kind of deck, Exodia deck, prevent your opponent from attacking. Good back then. Now, it's just irrelevant. It's going to pop it. That's it. It doesn't negate anything. Doesn't prevent your opponent from really doing anything important. Necro Valley. Super dependent on the metagame, but definitely a very strong card. Basically, your opponent can't banish cards from the graveyard. Well, neither player can banish cards from the graveyard. Neither player can move a card from the graveyard anywhere else. You can't return it to your hand. You can't return it to the deck. You can't return it to the extra deck. You can't special summon from the graveyard. Basically, if there isn't a card effect that requires you to do something with a card in the graveyard, you cannot do it. It's obviously very good against a lot of decks, very good against tier limits, very good against sprites. It's just good against a lot of modern meta decks. Just a few, I want to say like 9 months ago, there was a deck that just consisted of 3 Red Eyes Fusion and 9 copies of Necro Valley, and that deck was actually a pretty viable deck to play if you wanted to. You just summon Dragoon, you activate Necro Valley, and you set on traps and hand traps, and you basically would win the duel every single time because it's just a very strong deck. This card is a very strong card against the right meta deck. Next is Quiet Life. This card is a little weird. Basically, if a player normal summons, that player can't special summon. If a player special summons, they can't normal summon. It's good against decks that... It's probably like a C tier. It's good against decks that have normal summons as starters and then proceeds to special summon for the rest of the turn. It's good against those decks, but unless you're playing against that specifically, sometimes it can be a little bad. If you're playing against an all special summon deck, this card can just be a little bit weak, but it just depends on the deck you're playing against.
And what's weird about it is that they made it like a fair floodgate, because you have to activate it at the start of your main phase war.
Here we go.
So it affects you as well.
Yeah.
It's weird. Usually floodgates, they you do your thing and then you activate it during their turn, or you do it at the end and it doesn't affect you. But this one's like strange. I don't know why they did that.
It's a very fair flood, but I appreciate that. More floodgates should be fair, because obviously some of these get a little bit out of hand to make the game unfun. But when floodgates are like this, where they're like outrageously fair, they end up being bad. But overall, they're good for the game. Next is Messenger of Peace. I'll put this right next to Level Limit Area B. Basically, 1500 or higher monsters can't attack. You have to pay 100 life points during each standby phase. That is just... I'm sorry, Modern Yu-Gi-Oh! It's not happening. You activate this, they just pop it before they even enter the battle phase. Kaiser Coliseum is honestly probably like a B tier card. This is one of those cards that's on the ban list. You'd think, oh my god, this card is so good. Basically, if you control a monster, you activate this card, and then your opponent cannot summon more monsters than you control. So, that's it. The problem with this card is it's great going first. It sounds so good, right? You just summon this, like what you could summon is like, best case scenario, you summon like a Naturia Rose Whip in defense position, and then you like activate Kaiser Coliseum, and then your opponent can only activate one spell card, and they can't summon more than this. And that's really good, assuming that is what has happened, because then they can't special summon anymore. You can't summon any more than one monster. The problem is, this card going second does absolutely nothing, because your opponent special summoned a bunch of monsters, and yeah, that's it. Like, you really can't do anything.
Yeah, they don't have to match
Yeah.
what you have.
Yeah, if they went
Literally what
first,
it says on the card.
it's not like Gozin match where your opponent has to like send the difference to the graveyard or anything like that. So it's just, if they went first, this card just does nothing going second. It's only good going first. That's the problem. It should honestly come off the ban list. Like, it's probably a frustrating card to end up playing against, but if it does come off the ban list, it really, I don't believe we'll see that.
They're not playing this over Mystic Mine.
Yeah, like Mystic Mine is a much better version of this card. Like, it's crazy to me that this card is banned and Mystic Mine's at 3. Like, it's insane. It literally is a worse Mystic Mine. Next is Secret Village. This card is a really good Floodgate. Again, it just kind of depends on the deck. If you're playing a Spellcaster deck and you activate this card, again, this is another card. The problem is it has to be going first. Because going second, this card isn't going to do much. But going first, this card is really, really, really strong against a lot of decks. And one thing that you have to keep in mind is that a lot of, like Runic is a very strong deck right now, and a lot of the, what are those things called? The familiar possessed link monsters, the like Dark and Wind,
The Charmers.
Yeah, the Charmers. A lot of those, they're all, actually not all, they're all spellcasters. And as long as your deck is playing some kind of attribute, you can summon that card, and then you can activate this Floodgate. It's kind of crazy. Yeah, you can just generically search a field spell. You can lock your opponent out of anything.
The only thing
Any
that's scary is that that strategy works either way too.
Yeah, that's the other problem. The other problem is if you lose the spellcaster, now you locked yourself out of spell cards. Dangerous stuff.
Yeah, and if they summon a spellcaster, or if they're playing spellcasters, or they just have a random extra deck monster spellcaster.
Yeah, then this
it's
turns
a useless
off.
card.
Yeah, so it's probably like around here. It's probably like around here. It's only good going first. It's only good against non-spellcaster decks, so there's a few issues. Next is Swords of Revealing Light. This is another F tier. Like, you're never gonna play this. It was good. Like, believe me, it was a great card at one point. There was a point where this card was limited to 1.
Really?
That time has passed. Yeah. This card was limited to 1 because it locked your opponent out of attacking for 3 turns. It was incredibly annoying. It flipped all things into face-up attack position. But it's one of those cards that got so power crept. I don't think Konami could even make a version of this card that isn't that would, like, I don't think they could even make like a new version of this card that would be good enough to be worth playing, unless there was literally a card that you activated from hand, like a trap card, and then it like sends itself to the graveyard and has a lingering effect that for the next 3 turns, your opponent can't attack, unless that was the effect. But that would be incredibly annoying. It would just drag on duels for no real reason. Next is Domain of the True Monarchs. This one prevents special summoning as long as you control a monarch. It's
special
again
summoning from the extra deck.
Yeah, so it's probably like, it's good. It's probably like around here, but it's one of those cards that's only good in a monarch deck. Same thing with these guys. Like, it's only good in one archetype, but it is good in that archetype. So I probably should put it in B tier. It's very, very strong in its own archetype, but not like the craziest card. Honestly, the Monarch Erupt is probably a better card than this in this archetype. Dimensional Fissure is probably like A tier. It's limited to 1. It's a very strong Floodgate. It's another one that's like really good going first. Going second, it's just kind of like okay. Like, it's still good going second, because if you activate it and then you like start outing your opponent's board, everything that they have on their field gets banished instead. So,
and also a lot of hand traps to turn off.
Yeah. Oh yeah, this turns off hand traps. I totally forgot. Yeah, this turns off Droll. This turns off Ghost Ogre. Any hand trap, Effect Veiler. I don't remember.
I think so.
It sends itself to any card that sends itself to the graveyard as cost, basically gets negated by this card. You can't do it.
Too.
Yeah. So like the first gen of hand traps gets completely turned off. Like the newer hand traps just discard, say discard on them, so it's cool. You can get around playing this. But if you're trying to draw your opponent, like if you're playing this in Flunderies, it's a perfect example. If you're playing this in Flunderies, is really good because you activate this in Flunderies, and then your opponent tries to like draw you. They can't draw you even though draw beats Flunderies, you can't draw your opponent because they would have to send itself to the graveyard for cost. But again, the only issue is it's like going second. It's not quite as strong, but it's still better than Macrocosmos going second because it's not a trap card. You can just activate and start the system. Next is Summon Breaker, I think. This is a field spell that when either player specials, basically when either player summons twice, more than 3 times in main phase 1, it becomes their end phase automatically. This card actually saw some play when Metaverse was at 3, but Metaverse being at 1 basically like killed this card. Just because this card would be good if your opponent like activated any kind of card that would summon a monster. You just chain Metaverse, summon this, and then they becomes their 3rd summon and their turn ends. But unfortunately, that card is no longer. Metaverse is no longer around, but it's a decent card. Next is Mystic Mine. Mystic Mine is easily one of the best floodgates ever printed. I've never seen a floodgate warp the metagame quite like Mystic Mine has. It's so annoying. It is literally one of the most annoying cards to play against. I've never seen a community so rallied around getting a card banned that never gets banned. Basically, everyone knows what this does. I'm not even going to explain. It's incredibly annoying. It prevents monster effects from activating, prevents attacks from being attacked, and people just sit on it, especially Sky Strikers, and they just waste everybody's time, event after event, and then they win and they get 2nd place, and everyone talks about how great Sky Strikers did, but in reality, they just use Mystic Mine to sit on. And it's really just such a dirty way to play Mystic Mine.
And what's wild is that you can build a whole deck around it, or you can just throw it in your deck, and then like when everything goes bad, you just rely on Mystic Mine.
Yeah.
It's insane how versatile, you can play it in any deck.
Yeah. Even going second, it's good.
Yeah.
They have to negate it.
And it's a field spell, so it's searchable.
Yeah. If they don't negate it, what happens? They better negate it, because if they don't negate it, then the other monsters won't be able to activate, and they'll lose the duel. Next is Zombie World. Zombie World is a very good card. It's probably like high B tier. Again, like you don't even have to. This is a good thing on Zombie World. The decks that it's good against are like Flunderies, for example. And what's awesome about Zombie World is that you don't have to build a deck around it. As long as you can get a Banshee in the graveyard, you can just banish that Banshee and then activate Zombie World directly from deck. So you don't even have to stress. You don't even have to stress. What is it called? You don't have to stress like getting to this card. Next is Skill Drain. Skill Drain is. It's probably like high A or S tier. I'd say probably like high A tier. Just because Skill Drain is a bit fair. In that, number one, you pay 1,000 life points, which usually wouldn't matter in Classic Yu-Gi-Oh! But with the current time rules, it's a little bit frustrating. You pay 1,000, and then all of a sudden, time and round, now you lost because you paid 1,000 life points.
And that slows down the game.
Yeah, it slows down the game. And then on top of that, it only negates monster effects on the field, and you can still activate monster effects, graveyard, banished, hand. All of those graveyard effects are still activatable, and obviously, like if you activate this against like tier limits, like it almost does nothing against them, just because they still can summon their big monsters and nothing. It's almost like nothing really went bad. So it really is one of the fairest floodgates, but it's still a very highly impactful floodgate. Next is Recreate. This card is kind of a niche floodgate-like trap in obviously in Cleese. It's one of those ones that are a little bit fair, where if you have no Clee monster, then this card gets destroyed. But basically, it's just a monster's normal summon or flip summon. Its effects are negated, and then if a monster special summoned, it's level 5 or higher, its effects are negated. So the problem is it doesn't really stop like level 5 4 or lower monsters that are special summon. That's problem number 1. Problem number 2 is that it prevents, it doesn't do anything about link monsters, so it can just make a nightmare, like nightmare unicorn, just pop this. Next is Mistake. Mistake is it's basically just like Thunder Dragon Colossus, prevents searching. Probably like a B tier card. It just depends on the meta game. Against the right meta, it's just very strong. The problem is it's a trap card, so inherently it's got the issues of, it's a trap that prevents something, but it's not like a trap that sends anything to graveyard. It can't break a board. You just activate it and prevent something from happening. It's kind of the issue with it. Next is Anti-Spell. A lot of people are saying this card should be banned. A lot of people. There's another one that's like, it's a very, 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 very good Floodgate. Probably like A tier. Most of the decks that play it have ways to like get rid of your back row once you set it. It seems like it's not that bad, right? Oh, all spell cards must be set. The problem is, going second, that is a really frustrating thing to deal with, because obviously your opponent goes first, they set up their beautiful stunning board, and then they flip this, and now you have to set all of your spawn trap cards, which is really frustrating. Yeah, it's just kind of annoying, especially if you're playing a deck that relies on spells. Next is Wall of Revealing Light. This card is just like kind of okay. You pay life points, and then monsters with attack lower than the amount of life points that you pay cannot attack. This card is was involved back in the day in a few different like FTKs. I think it was like Life Equalizer. But as a Floodgate itself, this card is really not that strong. It's just like, it's like Messenger of Peace, but you have to pay life points to do it, like a lot of life points up front to do it, so not that great. Next up is Mind Drain. This card seems like it'd be really good. It negates all monster effects in the hand. Again, seems like it would be really good. It's good, like technically you can use it against hand traps, but like if you're playing this card, you're probably not playing a deck that is like weak to hand traps anyway. Yeah, if there was a deck that really activated a lot, the entire deck was all hand effects, and all of those hand effects were, yeah, if there was a deck that had all hand effects and all of those hand effects were the only decks the only cards in that deck, and also that deck was like a tier 0 deck, then this card would see some play. But as of right now, I don't see it seeing a lot of play. Imperial Iron Wall is a very good Floodgate. It basically prevents cards from being banished. Banishing cards is a huge part of Yu-Gi-Oh these days. Most decks banish cards, so if you can activate this against most decks, it's a wrap. Again, it was one that's only good going first. So going second, it literally does nothing. There are counter traps that are good going first and second. This one is not one of those cards, but obviously it's very good against a lot of different decks. Next is the Mask of Restrict. Mask of Restrict is probably like a C tier. It's really only good against like 5 decks ever, and the 5 decks are Flunderies, True Dracos, Monarchs, and that's pretty much it. Kaijus, technically, if you're really stressed about Kaijus, it's good against Kaijus. But for the most part, and Layer of Darkness, cards cannot be tributed. Other than that, like, those are the 5 decks that it's good against. If you're not playing against one of those 5 decks, it's not that good. Next is There Can Only Be One, which is probably like,
I think it's like S tier.
Yeah, one of the S tiers. It's very strong. Basically, you can only control one of any type. So, if you control a warrior monster, that's it. That's your only warrior monster. A lot of Yu-Gi-Oh decks are mono type, so like let's say you use this against, for example, like Gravekeepers. They can only control one spellcaster, and I think all of them are spellcasters, right?
Probably.
Yeah, all of them are spellcasters.
You use it against like Ancient Gears.
Yeah, well that's it. They can only control one machine.
And they can't attempt to summon more. So
yep.
even though they have one, they can't even like if they have a handful of them, they can't even activate the fusion spell.
Nope.
Because even though, like technically speaking, at the end of the resolution, you'd only have one, you still can't even attempt to go for it, which makes the card like insane.
Yeah, but that's why it's so good. It's very good against mono type decks. It essentially just destroys them.
Yeah.
It's just Yeah, it just craps on them. Next is lose 1 turn. This card is an objectively worst skill drain. Basically, all it does is it's skill drain, but only for special summon monsters, and only that turn. So literally, you lose 1 turn. It's a skill drain for 1 turn. So
also, you can't activate it if you have special summon monsters.
Yeah, which skill drain you can activate if you have special summon monsters or not.
As long as you have more than 1,000.
Yeah, so skill drain is an objectively better version of this card. Imperial Order S tier, probably one of the best floodgates to ever come out. It's one of the only cards on this entire list that beats Mystic Mine, which is kind of crazy. This was one of the best outs to Mystic Mine. It got banned, and now Mystic Mine is more annoying than ever. I would love to get 3 Imperial Orders back to deal with the 3 Mystic Mines that Konami refuses to ban.
And don't forget your favorite speech about Imperial Order.
What is it?
It's the only floodgate that outs it.
That is my speech, yeah. You've been listening. No, it's it outs. Most of the time you're playing back row, and like back row hate comes in the form of spell and trap cards. So, you have like Harpy's Feather Duster, sorry. Imperial, what it was is Lightning Storm, sorry. Twin Twisters, sorry, unless you chain it to the activation of this card. Most of the time, this card beats all of the back row that would typically get rid of this card. Also, the old errata of this card allowed you to turn it off at any given time, which is probably one of the craziest parts about this card. So you can, during your opponent's turn, they activate Regeki, psych, Imperial Order, fine, I end my turn. Your turn, don't pay the 700, and now you can play spells. But that was the old errata. If this is the old errata, we have to create like a new tier for this card. This card is so good. But either way, it's a very strong card. Royal Decree.
No, the opposite.
What?
It's Imperial Order to Iron Decree. Or
Royal Decree. Royal Decree is also good. It's just, again, we've had this discussion. It's the same thing with Naturia Beast and Naturia Barkion. Traps are just not that impactful in Yu-Gi-Oh!
But what is cool about Royal Decree is that if you go first and then you activate it at like their end phase, whatever traps they set are gone. They're done.
Yeah.
They cannot, like, they can use them, but they'll just get negated.
Yeah.
Even if they are counter traps or whatever.
Yeah.
So it does have some a little bit more uses than like Barkion and stuff like that.
You just can't chain it to counter traps.
Yeah.
But you can still turn off like generally counter traps.
It's still got a few applications, but it's still pretty niche.
Yeah, and you have to remember this has no cost, and this has no this just has no cost. It's just a line of text. Negate all trap cards. Very good card.
All other traps.
All other traps, yeah. Otherwise, this would be a very poorly written card. Stygian Dirge is a card that is very good in very specific situations. So it's probably like with all of the other good in very specific situation cards. Basically, what it does is it makes all monsters on the field level 1, which actually, your opponents,
monsters,
No, I'm sorry. It reduces the levels of all monsters your opponent controls by 1, which doesn't seem like a lot, but when you really think about it, if they're playing a synchro deck, let's say they're playing Sword Soul, right? That's probably the best synchro deck in the game right now. Sword Soul or Punks before they got hit on the ban list. But basically, let's say they're playing those. They summon Mui, activate Mui, summon the other token. You chain this. Now, both of those cards are level 3. There aren't any level 6 synchros that they have in their deck. What are they going to do with those 2 monsters? They're a synchro-based deck. There's nothing that they can really do. Best they can do is link them away and just pass.
They can't, because the token.
Oh, you can't link away the token. Even better. So they can't do anything really with it. They're stuck with that token on the board. So pretty good against that. Pretty good against, like, for example, sprites. Actually, this probably should be rated a little higher, now that I'm thinking about it. It's good against basically all synchro and all XYZ decks. It's not good against links.
Certain fusion decks. Actually, certain fusion links, because some of them specifically require levels.
Yeah, certain fusion. And then it's good against ritual decks that are not Drytron. Because Drytrons use attack points, but obviously if you use, like, if they activate like a ritual spell and you're like, psych chain this, they better have the exact numbers. And if they don't have those exact numbers in their hand and on the field, now they might have to tribute more than they thought they were going to have to tribute. So let's say they have like a level 8 monster that they want to summon, a level 8 monster on the field, activate this, you chain it, now their monster becomes level 7. Now they have to summon, now they might have to give that up and another level 8 monster, summon one monster. It can be a little helpful there. Next is Gozin. Gozin is probably, it keeps coming in and out of the meta. It's probably like in high A tier. I don't think this card is like ever honestly, I'm probably more compelled to put all of the floodgates that can break boards into the S tier. If your opponent makes a board of 8 negates and they're all like different attributes, you just activate this, your opponent activates a negate, you change strike, and you just out of their entire board. It's a floodgate that can go first and it can go second. It can like tear apart a board and it can prevent a board from being built. And that just is why it gets put way up here. It doesn't matter if you're going first or second, it's still good. Alright, next is Isobon. This is another like F tier, changing battle position nonsense. If you control a water monster and a monster is special summon that is not a water monster, you can change that monster to defense position. It doesn't negate the effect, it doesn't do anything, it literally just changes it to defense position. And then they out this card and they attack you. Next is Monarch's Erupt. This card is, again, it's one of those cards that's locked into a certain type, and that type is decks that tribute summon monsters. It basically is like skill drain in True Dracos and Monarchs, and Floowandereeze.
Not really Floowandereeze because they still play an extra deck.
Yeah,
you need no extra deck.
If they play an extra deck, then Floowandereeze. But sometimes, yeah, because Floowandereeze want to see like their Extrav and stuff like that. Like they don't go into the extra deck a lot, but they do obviously go into like the Extrav and the Prosperity and stuff like that. But in decks that basically, this is mostly you're gonna see it in True Dracos and Monarchs. Mostly Monarchs, like skill drain for them. It's a one-sided skill drain for Monarchs. It's a good card, but it's only locked. It's locked into 2 decks. Vanities, Emptiness. Oh my god, this card's so annoying. This card basically prevents special summon. It's probably like high S tier, somewhere around here. It's a card that prevents special summoning for both players, but obviously you're just going to make a board and then flip this, and then your opponent can't special summon. If a card is sent from field to graveyard, it outs this card, so it outs itself, which is kind of good. But if you have a strong board, your opponent's not going to be able to send anything from the field to the graveyard anyway. So this card is very, very strong. Summon Limit's another really, really annoying floodgate. It's probably like an A tier somewhere. The only thing, again, this one has the same issues that like Anti-Spell has. It's worse than Anti-Spell. It's probably somewhere like at the bottom of A tier. This card going second is garbage. Like it literally does nothing going second. It basically just prevents both players can only summon 2 times. Great going first because most people summon more than 2 times. But if you're going second, it's like, okay, they have a full board. They have all of the advantage, and now I'm going to have to like try to build a board while they have a board, and then I'm going to prevent them summoning twice. So it's really only good going second against like recursive decks. Going first, it's really good. Macrocosmos is a really good floodgate.
Man, I kind of want to say S tier for Macro.
I mean, S or...
It's like...
I'll be honest with you, Master Duel, it's at 3, it does nothing.
Really?
Nobody plays it. Nobody plays it, mostly because, again, it's just good going first.
Yeah. It's
good going first, and going second, it just doesn't really do much. So that's kind of the problem. It's in the same boat as Anti-Spell and Summon Limit.
But against some decks, you activate it.
You win.
And you win. Auto win.
It's an auto win against a lot of decks.
There's a lot of cards. There's a lot of floodgates that are like that.
Yeah. Almost every card on this list is an auto win against a lot of decks. Yeah. It's just, you have to... Are you going first? How easy is it to set up? Is really the issue. And this is one of those cards. This is super easy to set up.
And let's not forget, you get to summon Helios, the Primordial Sun.
I mean, you should have said that earlier. Next is DNA. I think it's DNA... Surgery. What does it change all types on the field?
Yeah. All monster types on the field.
This thing is not that good.
It's like Zombie World, but
yeah, it's Zombie World, but not as easy to play. Why am I even up here? It's probably like in D tier. We don't have enough stuff in D tier. Yeah, it's probably like in D tier.
It's still a good effect against certain decks.
Yeah.
Like against like the whatever Zombie World is useful against. Same thing with DNA. Surgery.
Like if you're playing against Salamangrates and you change everything to like a dragon, now they can't summon their Balinks. Okay, you put them in a bind. But honestly, Zombie World is just better because if you could just find a way to foolish the Banshee, you have access to Zombie World, and it's a quick effect, so you don't even have to like. You can play around back row removal, so you can like your opponent like Lightning Storm the rest of your back row, and then you can chain the Graveyard effect to activate a new Zombie World, and then now you lock them out again. So it's just a worse version of Zombie World, to be honest with you. And the band played on.
Oh, but DNA surgery actually works against zombies.
It does work against zombies. It's annoying.
It changes zombies into bears.
And the band played on is a decent Floodgate against. It's a situational decent Floodgate. I'd probably say it's in B tier. Basically, neither player can summon monsters with the same level that you have on the field. And then they also, that's basically what it does.
And it does the same thing for XYZs.
Yeah, XYZ, so ranks too. So, I mean, it's decent. So it's good against splites, right? The whole deck is level 2s. You activate this against them, they're stuck. So going first, you set this against splites, you basically win. The problem is splites aren't even the best deck in the game right now. So, it's just, it's a little bit iffy. Next is Chaos. What's this thing called? It was the Chaos.
Light Imprisoning Mirror.
Light Imprisoning Mirror. It depends on the meta. If light monsters are strong, this card's strong. If light monsters are weak, this one's weak. It's kind of like, say, B tier, bottom of B tier. We'll put Shadow Imprisoning Mirror higher than that because generally dark monsters are better. It's probably somewhere in like the higher end of B tier. It just basically negates the effects of all dark monsters. This negates the effect of all light monsters. Again, it just depends on the metagame, right? So when Drytrons was really good, this card was great.
Yeah.
Going first.
Shadow Imprisoning is not too bad because it absolutely destroys tier limits.
Yeah. If you go first.
Yeah.
But the thing is, tier limits play Galaxy Cyclone already to out the Mystic Mine.
No, but if you...
Not Galaxy Cyclone. The one that banished from Graveyard, destroy a face up.
Yeah, Galaxy Cyclone.
Yeah.
But the thing is, you can't activate that the turn you send it. So you play this, you stop them for a turn.
Yeah, and then you can do your thing.
Yeah, and then you just destroy them next turn.
This card is like one of the worst cards here. Basically, all level, level 3 or lower monsters get changed to attack position. So it's the reverse of level limit area B. The whole thing is you just make your opponent's monsters change to attack position that are really weak. But again, this is just such a slow Floodgate. It's sorry guys, it's not happening. Next is
Look at Soul Drain.
Soul Drain. Yeah, Soul Drain is a decent card. It negates graveyard effects, which is really good. I think this card is still limited to
Graveyard.
1. Yeah, Banished and Graveyard effect. I think this card's still limited to 1. It hasn't seen play in like...
No, it's not. It's unlimited.
It's not limited anymore? It hasn't seen play in like I don't even remember how long. I haven't seen this card see play in a really long time. But it's a decent Floodgate in the right situations. I'd probably say it's somewhere up here. It's not a bad Floodgate by any means. Against the Graveyard deck, it's very strong. Yeah, I mean, it would beat theoretically tier limits because their Graveyard effects are turned off. But yeah, it's just very situational against the right decks. This is another one that's really good. This is Rivalry. Rivalry is just one of those Floodgates that just continues to come back into the metagame. It's good against... it's good going first and second. That's what I'll keep saying. The Floodgates up here, for the most part, are good going first and going second. And you'll find some sort of uses for them. But this basically can only control one type. And if you attempt to summon anything of the same type, you just can't. And if you have different types, you have to send them to the graveyard until you control one type. It's very good. Dragon's Bind is good in dragon decks, and that's about it. Yeah, your opponent can't special summon monsters.
High attack dragon decks too.
Yeah, high attack dragon decks. Your opponent can't special summon monsters if you control a dragon that's 2500 or less attack. Neither player can special summon a monster with with less attack than that monster. So pretty decent there. Yeah, it just basically prevents a bunch of weaker monsters. Good in like Red Eyes deck, but it really just very situational on what deck you play it in. Royal Oppression's insanely annoying. This is probably another like S tier, probably like top 5 card. Basically what this card does is when any player attempts to summon a monster, Either player can pay 800 life points to negate that special summon. This is really, really strong, but again, it's one of those things where if you go first and you set up a board and you set this card and you pass on whatever board you have in your opponent, every time they try to special summon, you just negate it. It doesn't even matter that half of the effect prevents you from summoning things, because you've already summoned. You've gone through your deck, you've gone through your graveyard, you've done everything you needed to. So now you can just basically keep preventing your opponent. Next, and this is the last card. This is DNA Transplant. I think DNA Surgery changes types, and this one changes an attribute, which this probably is worst, because changing an attribute really doesn't have that big of an effect on the game that changing types does. Like if you were to change every Flundery monster into a fire monster, it really would not have affected it all that negatively. Just because, okay, like, yeah, you have Flunderies now and they're Firebirds, but, like, the whole thing is they're Wing Beasts. Like, if you change all zombies to Earth monsters, like, it really doesn't affect the deck negatively because they're still zombies. Like, Yu-Gi-Oh! Is built more around types than it is around attributes. It used to be more about attributes than it was about types, but it's shifted in a large way. So changing the attribute really doesn't have that much of a impact on the game. So it's one of the worst hands.
Unless you activate it. Called Darks and activate Shadow Imprisoning Mirror.
Then you're thinking too far ahead. Then yeah, then there's a lot going on. But these are all of the floodgates, obviously ranked A, B, C, and D and F tier. But yes, if you enjoy this tier list, let us know in the comment section down below, and have a great day.
And if we missed any of your favorites, let us know.
La 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 la.